Alright lads, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering what in many ways is my favourite jet from the update. And again, in my opinion, rather a hidden gem. It's pretty fair to say that not many people play top tier France. It's one of the nations like the British and the Italians which doesn't really see that much love, despite having pretty good vehicles. But unlike the British tech tree, the French really did lack a good close air support vehicle. Sure, they had good helicopters, as well as the Mirage F1C, the ground strike option one, but even still they only had dumb bombs and some air-to-ground missiles. What France really was lacking was a plane capable of carrying precision guided munitions. These planes, like the British Jaguar GR1 and the British Harrier, gives a nation armed with them the ability to conduct very accurate ground strike at high altitudes, evading those pesky SAM systems like the Tunguska and Tor-M1. As I said, France really didn't have an option like that before because it only had planes with dumb bombs and dumb missiles. Well, that all changed with the addition of the Mirage 2000D-R1. This is a regular Mirage 2000 with a gamer in the back with his very own vertical monitor. While I'm sure he's a Chad and only plays the beta version of Minecraft like a true man, he also has a targeting pod, precision guided munitions, and Magic 2 missiles. Anyway, before we go any further, let's cover some of the basics. The Mirage 2000D is the newest rank 8 plane for the French tech tree. It sits at battle rating 11.3 for arcade, realistic and simulator battles, notably the same battle rating as the British, German and Italian Tornado. To unlock this plane, you're going to have to grind out 410,000 research points before unlocking it for the cost of 1,100,000 silver lions. To put the plane in your lineup, again it's going to cost you 310,000 silver lions, and for the expert and ace qualification, which isn't really that important if you're using it in ground realistic, but is if you're using it in air realistic. Anyway though, it's 1,100,000 silver lions for the expert qualification, and 3,400 golden eagles for the ace qualification. So lads, with the addition of this new French jet, is it worth playing top tier French ground forces? Or kind of like the British and the Italians, is it just an afterthought in Gaijin's mind? Well, if you'd like to know the answer to that question boys, I'd stick around for the rest of the video. Alright lads, welcome back, and starting as always with the engine. The Mirage 2000D is powered by the Snecma M53P2. At military power this produces 6,700 kilos of thrust, and when afterburning that increases to 9,690 kilos. With clean wings this gives the plane a rate of climb of 192 meters per second, but with a full bomb loadout that drops down to around 110 meters per second. This obviously makes the Mirage 2000D one of the most high performing ground strike aircraft in War Thunder, and that is especially useful in ground realistic battles where you kind of want to spawn in and then immediately turn to the right or left and climb for a little bit, up to around 10,000 meters. This is pretty straightforward to do in the Mirage 2000D, especially if you compare it to something like the A6C Tram or an A10 which isn't afterburning and has a pretty low thrust to weight ratio. It's also one of the strengths of the newly added F16. The ability to climb high as soon as you spawn in basically makes you immune to any enemy air defense systems. Very good feature to have in a CAS jet. The Mirage is also capable of reaching near Mach 2 at high altitude. At around 12,000 meters with clean wings you can reach top speeds of around 2,200 kilometers per hour. So like the Mirage 2000C, its fighter brother, the plane is still very fast. Despite being a hot airframe due to that very powerful afterburning engine, we can also carry 88 countermeasures. If you're taking this thing out in ground realistic battles, I would take along some flares and chaff to be honest. However, this plane definitely does excel in ground realistic battles as opposed to air realistic. If you are playing in ground though, I would mainly take along just flares. You don't really need to use chaff that much. You aren't really going to be going up against any semi-active radar homing missiles, and while chaff can confuse the tracking system of like a ADATS or a Tunguska, they're basically just going to take manual control and still hit you, so it's not really that useful to take chaff in my opinion. Anyway, let's stop talking about the defense and the performance and start talking about the offensive capabilities, as I'm sure what you are most interested in. Before we get into the weapons, let's go over the avionics. The Mirage is equipped with the Thompson CSF radar. This is quite advanced but rather redundant on this aircraft, as you do not have any semi-active radar homing missiles, only self-defense infrared guided missiles. Regardless though, this radar does have a look up and look down head-on feature, basically just pulse Doppler mode, as well as IFF, track while scan, and as well as a BVR and ACM mode. This is mainly useful for sim players, and while it isn't really that useful in air realistic or ground realistic, it is still a nice feature to have. We then move on to the pilot, which ironic gets CCIP for cannons, which this plane doesn't have yet. Good job Guardian for forgetting to give it its optional gun pod. I believe it does have one. There's been quite a lot of moaning on the Gaijin forums and stuff like that. But this plane isn't American, so it's probably never going to get changed. Never underestimate the power of American mains whining. Anyway, the pilot does get CCIP for the cannons, rockets and bombs, as well as a CCRP or constantly calculated release point for the bombs. I've already covered that this plane does not have an internal weapon, which does limit its ability to function as a... You can't really defend yourself really. You can carry 2 missiles, we can carry 2 Matra R55 Magic 2s, and even though these missiles are very powerful with 35 Gs of maximum overload, I would still rather have a gun as well. While guns are a little bit redundant, especially at this battle rating in War Thunder, you really do miss them when you need them, especially if you're in a close dogfight or if you're trying to take out a helicopter. Magic 2s are good though. They are all aspect missiles with an all aspect lock range of 3 km and a rear aspect lock range of 6 km. And as I said, they are capable of pulling 35 Gs. They're also pretty flare resistant, kind of like the AIM-9Ls. So if you launch these against someone in a rear aspect shot, especially if they're afterburning, it is very hard for them to dodge the missile, even if they are flaring. But that is not all that the plane can carry. We also have a wide variety of ground strike options, starting with some unguided rockets. These are the SNEB Type 23s. They travel pretty fast at 651 meters per second, but only have a warhead containing 435 grams of TNT. This is much less than even something like the Mighty Mouse, so despite the 400mm of penetration, the post-penetration damage is pretty bad. We can also carry a selection of bombs. We have the 250 kilo SAMP Type 25s, which will destroy any vehicle within a radius of 7 meters, as well as the 500 pound LDGP Mark 82s, which will also destroy any vehicle within a radius of 7 meters. If you wanted me to tell you the difference between the 250 kilo bomb and the 500 pound bomb, I'd tell you that one's 250 kilos and one's 500 pounders. I have no idea the difference between these two bombs. They both have the same armor penetration of 82mm at maximum. The only real difference is the radius of fragment dispersion, which doesn't really matter against enemy tanks. Oh well though, we can also carry a targeting pod in the center line hardpoint. This is actually a very good targeting pod. It only has first generation thermal imaging, which is a little bit of a letdown. It means it can be quite hard to distinguish targets on a battlefield. This is probably going to be a lot worse for simulator players, as it is quite hard with that first generation thermal to actually identify what you are looking at. I usually use the thermal viewer to identify movement, and then go back to the regular TV camera to actually distinguish what I'm looking at. So just use the thermal for finding movement, and then go back to the normal camera for actually targeting. But a targeting pod is no good if we have nothing to use it with. Well, we're in luck. The first weapon that we have is the AS-30L. This is an air-to-ground missile. This travels at 370 meters per second, which granted is quite slow for a missile, but it has a warhead containing 115 grams of TNT, giving it an explosive penetration of 81mm. The AS-30L nodes can be slaved using your targeting pod, meaning you can find a target, fire the missile, and as long as you keep the pipper on the targeting pod on top of an enemy, the missile will guide itself onto that enemy, usually killing them in a single hit. In my opinion, these missiles are probably better than precision guided bombs or laser guided bombs, because they get to the target much faster. You can carry 2 of these air-to-ground missiles, as well as 2 anti-air missiles. That covers both the outer and inner hardpoints on our wings, but we also have hardpoints on the center line of the fuselage. This is where we can also carry some precision guided bombs. So this gives us precision guided missiles, precision guided bombs, and incredibly advanced infrared missiles, all in one payload. This means when I fly into battle, I'm armed with 2 ASL-30 nodes, 2 Magic 2 missiles, and 2 of our next weapon, the GBU-12 Paveway 2. These are quite small compared to most laser guided bombs in War Thunder, but do not be fooled, what they lack in mass is made up for in explosive power. Despite only containing 117 kilos of TNT, they will one-shot pretty much every tank in the game. That's 2 kilos more explosive filler than the ASL-30 Nords, so they are still more than lethal enough. I've had no problem getting kills with them, and if anything, their small size just makes them more efficient. We also have 2 extra PGMs, the GBU-16 which contains 272 kilos of TNT, as well as the BGL-1000. This contains a lot bigger explosive filler at 500 kilos. In my opinion, there's not really much point using these bombs. While they are much powerful than the GBU-12s, you can only carry one of them instead of the 2 of the GBU-12s. So I typically take 2 GBU-12s, 2 ASL-30 Nords, and 2 IR magic missiles. And that pretty much covers it for the weaponry of the Mirage 2000D. If anything, my largest criticism is the lack of a cannon. But as I said, I believe that this plane should have a gun pod mounted or some sort of gun in the future. A lot of people have been saying that it is lacking its gun at the minute. And that is in reality the only weakness of this plane at the minute. Especially if you are just using this plane for ground realistic battles. If you're trying to flare this plane in air realistic battles, then there are more downsides. While the plane is fast and has countermeasures, granted the lack of a gun is still an issue in air realistic as well, but you also don't have any semi-active radar homing missiles, which kind of makes you off the meta at the minute. In a purely air-to-air role, you can only take along 2 IR missiles. That only gives you 2 shots at a kill in the game, really, unless you go back and reload. As I said, you don't have any guns to even fall back on that. So if you're trying to get a plane for realistic battles in the French tech tree, the Mirage 2000C is obviously the better choice. But if you're a French main and you like the French Leclerc tanks, or however you pronounce it, I always get hate comments every time I do a video on the French tanks. But anyway, as you can probably hear, my voice is going again. Someone accused me and Define of kissing each other last time, because we both got the same illness. Just goes to show you what the War Thunder community is like. Anyway boys, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. And if you didn't enjoy it, please do consider leaving a comment down below to let me know what vehicle you guys would like to see me review next. I'd also like to say a big thank you to all my YouTube members. And I'm going to go back into bed and get a nice hot drink. I'm going to cough my head off. Anyway boys, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Really helping the channel grow lately. And I'll see you in the next review.